Ever feel like your boss is trying to push you out the door even though they're not, like, officially firing you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's that, like, awkward in-between zone, right?
Exactly. And today's deep dive is going to make you rethink what even leaving a job means, especially when we're talking about a total rock star employee who suddenly, well, isn't.
It happens more than you think, unfortunately, and that feeling of what's going on here can be so unsettling.
Right. So we're unpacking this Philippine Supreme Court case. Get ready for the long title. JS Unitrade Merchandise, Inc. versus Ruperto S. Samson, Jr., G.R. No. 2004-05. And this was decided on February 26, 2020.
Okay, got it.
And it all starts with this guy, Ruperto Samson, Jr. He's like the star salesman for JS Unitrade.
Top performer.
Oh, yeah, the best. Promotions, raises, awards, you name it. They even sent him on a trip to China. Like, can you imagine?
Wow, they must have really valued him.
Totally. But then things get weird. Middle of 2007, the company starts questioning his performance.
Oh, so it's like a complete 180. What happened?
It's a real head-scratcher.
Right.
And they give him this crazy ultimatum. Either you take a demotion back to your old job, or you leave the company.
Oof. Talk about a tough choice.
I know, right? Like, how would you even process that?
Yeah, that would be a huge hit to your ego, especially after being such a high achiever.
Totally. To make matters worse, they bring in this new employee who takes over Samson's old position, the Associate Area Sales Manager 1.
Ouch.
Yeah, and they stick Samson with just, like, office work.
So basically a total downgrade.
Pretty much. And understandably, he feels super harassed and humiliated by all of this.
It's a huge change. Makes you
Hmm.
wonder, like, was it intentional on the company's part?
Yeah, like, what was their goal here?
Yeah.
Anyway, Samson decides he can't take it anymore and stops going to work.
So he quit.
Kind of, but it's more complicated than that.
Well,
He files a complaint with the NLRC, claiming what's called constructive dismissal.
constructive dismissal. Okay, I'm listening.
Basically, he's saying the company made his work life so awful that he was forced to quit even though they didn't actually fire him.
Yeah, that's a tough one to prove. It's not like a straightforward firing.
Exactly. But
Oh.
JS Unitrade, they weren't just going to take this lying down. They fight back, saying they were just dealing with performance issues and that his transfer was totally justified.
So it becomes a he said, she said kind of situation.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a huge deal for both sides because the outcome could set a precedent for other cases like this.
Right, it's not just about Samson and JS Unitrade anymore.
Exactly. So the Labor Arbiter, who's like the judge in this situation, initially rules that there's not enough proof of constructive dismissal.
Oh, so they sided with the company.
Well, kind of. They also said that the company's eventual decision to dismiss Samson was too harsh, so they awarded him back pay and deseparation pay, like as compensation.
Interesting, so sort of a middle ground there.
Yeah. Seems like a fair compromise, right? But it's not over yet.
Yeah.
The NLRC, who reviews labor decisions, they overturn this and say the transfer was valid, and get this, that Samson actually abandoned his job by not showing up.
Wow, really? So now they're saying he quit.
Yeah. Talk about a plot twist. It really makes you wonder what actually defines job abandonment. Like, did he just walk away, or was he, like, driven to it by the company?
Right, there's a big difference between choosing to leave and feeling like you have no other choice.
So now one court's saying he was forced out, and the other's saying he quit. It's a total mess.
It does happen, yeah. Cases like this can get pretty complicated, lots of back and forth.
So what happened next? Did Samson just give up?
Nope, he took it to the Court of Appeals.
Okay, so like round 3 of this whole legal battle.
You got it. And the Court of Appeals, well, they kind of threw everyone a curveball.
Oh. What did they decide?
They basically said neither side was completely right. They agreed with the Labor Arbiter about giving Samson separation pay, but said no to the back pay.
Wait, so they sided with Samson and the company? How did that even work?
Right. It's kind of wild. Their reasoning was that, okay, there wasn't enough proof that the company intentionally forced him out. But they also didn't think he straight up abandoned his job either.
So both sides messed up a little.
That's exactly what they said. Basically, a big miscommunication that just blew up into this whole thing. They specifically pointed to the fact that Samson filed his complaint right after he stopped going to work.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. If he really wanted to just quit and be done with it, why would he even bother with a complaint?
Right. The Court of Appeals basically said the whole working relationship was just too messed up to fix. That's why they agreed with the separation pay. It was like acknowledging that Samson got hurt in all this, even if it wasn't intentional on the company's part.
Man, this is getting complicated. I can totally see why this went all the way to the Supreme Court. What did JS Unitrade do?
They weren't happy about paying separation pay if they technically didn't fire him.
Yeah, that does seem kind of unfair from their perspective.
Right. So they took it to the highest court in the land, hoping they'd see things differently. Talk about a high-stakes gamble.
Okay, so Supreme Court time. What happened? What was their final decision in all this?
This is the crazy part. The Supreme Court actually agreed with the Court of Appeals.
No way. They sided with Samson.
Yep. They basically looked at all the evidence and said that, yeah, Samson filing that complaint right after leaving showed he didn't want to abandon his job.
So both the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court thought the whole abandonment thing was bogus.
Exactly. It was more like, okay, maybe they didn't officially fire him, but they sure made it impossible for him to stay.
Wow. So that's a pretty strong statement from the highest court in the country. What about the separation pay?
They kept that too. The Supreme Court basically acknowledged that the whole situation was just too messed up to go back to normal, and Samson deserves some kind of compensation.
This whole thing is like something out of a movie. You never know how these things will turn out. It really makes you wonder, though, like, what can you actually do if you're in a situation like this?
That's what's so important about this case, right? Like knowing your rights as an employee and actually, doing something about it if you need to.
So let's say, hypothetically, you think you're getting pushed out. Even if you haven't officially been fired, what's the first step?
Document everything. That's like rule number one. Just like how Samson filing that complaint right after leaving helped him, you got to keep track of all your work, like your reviews, any messages with your boss, changes to your job, literally anything.
So like a paper trail, just in case.
Exactly. That way, if you need to prove you were treated unfairly or like forced into quitting, you've got the evidence.
It's kind of scary, though, how this case went back and forth so much, Like, one minute it's in his favor, the next it isn't.
That's why it's so important to talk to a lawyer if you're dealing with something like this. They can help you figure out all the legal stuff because it can get really complicated.
Okay, so big picture. What should our listeners take away from all of this? What's the most important thing?
I think it's that even if you think your work situation is simple, like black and white, it can get really tricky really fast. So know your rights, keep good records, and if things start to feel off, don't be afraid to ask an expert for help.
And on the flip side, I think this is a good reminder for companies too, right? Like good communication and treating your employees fairly can prevent a lot of these headaches.
Totally. It benefits everyone to be open and honest with each other.
So much to think about from just one case, right? What are your thoughts on all this? Share your comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into these fascinating and sometimes really complicated topics.